Welcome to the Sunday Times Politics Weekly, where we bring you the insights and interviews of the forthcoming elections. I'm Mike Siluma, and thanks for joining us. This time on the Politics Weekly, in the run-up to the elections, we speak to Mmusi Maimane, who is, of course, the leader of Build One SA, or Build One South Africa, formed 2 years ago.
You asked Mr. Ramaphosa to sit down first. I'm standing.
Now I warn you.
I need to put on my big girl panties and keep going.
You can't have two speakers standing at the same time.
Security services of the Republic of South Africa, you may intervene.
There's been several attempts on my life.
Lower that hand or
not allowed.
The president is accused of serious crimes.
I know I'm going to become the president of this country.
You are going to be the president.
I am going to be the president
of South Africa.
Of South Africa. There's no confusion.
Of South Africa.
I will cancel race.
Corrupt people do not eat alone. They have a spider web.
I'm there. I can lead them. I'm ready to be the president of this country.
I now suspend the proceedings. I have warned you.
Hey, welcome to the podcast, Ndate Maimane.
No, thank you. And it's my great privilege to be here, and thank you for having me.
Yes. Now, a long time ago, there was a rumor that you are or umruti. That's your day job.
That is that.
You are in the church. You are a preacher or a priest, but actually you are a church leader. What have you been up to these days? Have you completely disengaged from the pulpit, or you juggling things? Or
no, we were leading a local church, and I'd always grown up in an environment of spirituality. I think you can't disassociate your spirituality from struggles. I mean, we were raised in Soweto, and I grew up Catholic, and I can remember some of the Catholic nuns who were very much activists, yet at the same time as that Catholic nuns. They would be the sort of people who were locked up, so many of them. Sister Christina Mutloung is one of my heroes still today, because he was someone who was able to understand that spirituality and politics are not disassociated from each other. So now, as you grow up, and I was involved in church, time constraints came on board. So I haven't disengaged my spirituality by any matter of means. I still serve God. I still attend a local church. I just preach.
How local? You mean Dobsonville?
No. Wherever I'm closer to home. So because of this campaign, I've traveled a lot. And so we go to a church together with the family. But now the politics, again, not as something that I find foreign from what I used to do. And I'm one of those people who says, it's because of my faith I'm involved in politics, but my politics are not about my faith in that sense, in that I'm not trying to make politics Christian. I'm trying to ensure that as a Christian I can serve in politics.
You can make a contribution in society.
Correct.
Now, just to go straight into the election itself, what's your view? Some people say historically we've had maybe the big three or big four, depending on which election one is looking at. Some people, are saying, look, there are just far too many, political parties this time round. Is it a good thing for the electorate? If you've got such a long ballot, with so many faces, so many, logos and all of that. What's your view?
My stance is this. Let's take it 2 years back, because this problem was coming 2 years ago. Because when we spoke about the Electoral Amendment Bill, we were clear about the fact that it would force a constituency-based model. And on the basis of a constituency-based model, the electorate then can have a choice directly to know who they are voting for in their locale. So you can say someone who lives in Johannesburg has a member of parliament or provincial legislature who comes from here and deals with things that are prescribed in the constitution that are about healthcare, education, the economy, etc. But because parliament failed to do that job, we've ended up with this extensive ballot, because what you can't do in that environment is that you keep a strict proportional representative model, which means every vote counts, which is important. But the dilemma in this instance is that you can't pre-coalesce. You can't form parties together to say, Lona, you are strong in Johannesburg, let's pull back our forces. You guys campaign, but you guys are strong in KZN.
Yeah.
We're going to work with you to get a KZN person there. So it's only in that model you can create pre-coalitions, which limits. But as Build One South Africa, we've been very intentional about this issue. So we fought the law and we'll continue to fight the law. It will reduce the ballot.
Yeah.
Secondly, I've engaged parties. As you know, I spoke about a merger of 7 parties and literally parties coming together to say, we are only putting 1 on the ballot. So typically you would have had all 7 on the ballot, like you have these charters, etc. But now you've only got 1. And there are many others who have come to say, religious, civic society organizations coming together to say, we share the vision of building one South Africa. We've got a common objective. And so we want to work with Build One South Africa and put that on the ballot. I'm optimistic that after the 29th of May, you'll see a harmonizing of people who share common values. They'll come together. They'll work together over the long period of time. But I think they have to work together with a condition that says you have shared values, a shared vision. And for us, we've made it unequivocal. Let's put a job in every home. Let's eradicate corruption. Let's educate our kids for the future. Fix this country so that we have ethical leaders in parliament. Yeah. We agree on those principles. We can charter a way forward where there's harmonization.
I'd like us to come back to that, later on in our conversation. You've just said that Parliament failed.
Completely.
In the sense of being able to accurately or fully represent voters.
Yeah.
Where has the failure been? Because very soon, touch wood, you will be going straight back to Parliament.
Yeah. When the Concord ruled, Judge Madlanga said, what you've got to do when you amend the electoral law is to make sure that power is back to the people. Right? He, in fact, used the words, when you say amandla ngawethu, then it must be clear that power is to the people. What Parliament did is that they took the judgment and said, okay, all the Concord is asking us to do is just to literally put independence on the ballot. And it became what I'd like to call malicious compliance of the Constitutional Court judgment. Just fella, let's just do this quick thing. That's why the law is deficient. And that's why the law has all of these problems that are invented, because it maliciously complied. It did not address issues that are fundamental to when you introduce independence. Judge Madlanga understood the fact that the introduction of that will have implications. Now remember, a commission was put on the table that recommended the entire reform of the Electoral Amendment Act. It proposed 200 directly elected, 200 was one of the proposals, to say, how do we ensure that there's much better accountability? Because we have things like state capture today because MPs are not accountable to the people. So when Parliament failed in the job, it created a situation where even still today we now have what we have. Imagine, think about it differently. If we'd amended the law, you would have fewer parties, naturally, because some parties will only contest in Bochabelo or whatever the community is. So you wouldn't have this proliferation at a national level. Secondly, you could actually eventually end up knowing who you are voting for by name, not just by party. When somebody's in a party, that's not the issue, but you get to know them by name. You say, Mmusi, you represent me here. I want to know 1, 2, 3, and 4. And thirdly, the long-term objective, and I'm not going to hide it, we are an anomaly. When the Zondo Commission raised this question of the Electoral Amendment Bill, the Zondo Commission asked the president what he thought about the direct election of the president. Africa, South Africa, Southern Africa, we are unique here. Every other Southern African country, Zambia, Zimbabwe, etc., directly elect their president. Why? It's to empower the person with a mandate so that none of us are sitting here watching a party conference going, that's where the election of the president is. But actually the election of the president would be now, typically. So that we all know, you vote for Mmusi Maimane for president, his mandate is owed to the people. And therefore he has to serve the people. What we have at the moment is, as the Zondo Commission, before the Zondo Commission, you'll recall, the Constitutional Court had already ruled in the motion of no confidence case against President Zuma to say the failure wasn't just on President Zuma in breach of Section 89 of the Constitution. The failure was also on Parliament, because Parliament failed to hold people account.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to, as South Africans, say to ourselves, when you have a parliamentary democracy, Parliament must be strengthened. That's why I'm so looking forward to coalitions, because I think then no one can capture the state or capture the institution. And when you capture the institution is when you've got numbers and you say to yourself, to say a swimming pool is a fire pool.
Yeah.
Then you've done it.
Yeah. Let's just understand your strategy, because I'm sure you'll agree with me that our politics is often a game of numbers once you get to to making laws and all of that. What kind of influence do you see Build One SA having in Parliament? Because the majority, you probably I saw some polls have given you 5% into Gauteng. How do you see yourself, once you're in Parliament as a minority party, first having influence, to direct things on the items that are on your shopping list, if you like, in terms of your manifesto?
I mean, we have that 10-point plan, starting with let's put a job in every home. Let's fix Transnet. Let's keep our communities safe. Let's build broadband infrastructure, invest in townships, keep people safe, make sure there's ethical leadership. Those are our conditions, right? You then take those and you say to yourself, firstly, in what I envisage, which is a government that is made up of a grand coalition of the opposition. I think South Africans must get used to that idea. When you build a grand coalition of the opposition, means all the parties must come together. Some parties may not be part of the coalition, natural, because we don't agree on policy.
Yeah.
But they may very well stand up and say, we will use our votes to elect a presiding officer, to elect a speaker, to elect the president, and when it's said and done, we will use those to pass the budget. But in passing the budget, we can keep constantly going backwards and forwards, asking questions about what are issues that we need to bring on here. Some parties may be that, and other parties may say we formalize the coalition to work. Our role as BOSA, as I've proven before, even in 2016, I was able to bring parties together, parties that never used to speak to each other. You will remember when we were able to set up a coalition in Johannesburg. In fact, the only coalition that lasted and held, we were able to bring parties from as far a spectrum as the EFF and the Freedom Front Plus together in one place to say, let's work together to set up that. So that's a crucial role. Because when I say build one South Africa, Ndate Mike, one of the strengths that I feel I bring to the conversation is that I can have a conversation with Peter Groenewald.
Yeah.
And I can have a conversation with Julius Malema. And I can have with anyone. Because we are able to harmonize and bring people together. That's what our mission is. Let's presume that is not a possibility because the NC gets 50% for argument's sake. Then I've been very clear. We want to occupy the portfolios in finance, in education, and we have a plan about the items we'll be tabling there. We are working already to try and make sure there are bills that you begin to set up. You don't arrive. That's why I was very loath to talk about this idea of manifestos, because manifestos are synonymous with promises, empty promises. We tabled a jobs plan, and emanating from that jobs plan, we're clear. Even on the budget, we are going to get there and campaign for 220 billion rands that must be allocated to township economy. So in opposition, we are going to fight for these things. And I can assure you, Gauteng, Western Cape, KZN are all going to be coalition governments.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you. You mentioned the concept of a grand coalition.
Correct.
And yet you were reluctant to go into the multi-party coalition.
I was, and I still.
In the multi-party charter.
The charter itself as a DA project. Set up parties to sit underneath it, and those parties are still competing with each other. So what would be the purpose of me being there?
But they say the purpose is to stop the ANC,
No.
Don't you want to stop the ANC?
You can only do that post the elections.
Yeah.
If the discussion was, no. Let's come together to bring parties together and form and put one thing on the ballot. Different conversation.
Which is not DA.
No.
Other words,
it could be anything. But you put one thing on the ballot, then you can say to the people of South Africa, this is what you vote for. But the multi-party charter is not on the ballot. So People have to go express their votes in all of those parties. That was the first thing. The second thing is, I knew even back then, and still is true today, all of those parties collectively would never get over 50%. Where are these voters who are missing to get you over 50%? They are not going to leap across and go vote for the DA. As I've said before, I want for ANC voters who have given up on the ANC to be able to vote for Build One South Africa. Why? Because all of us share in the pain of the demise of the ANC. This is the party of Nelson Mandela has become a criminal enterprise. Those South Africans don't want to hear you saying you hate their party. I don't hate the ANC.
Yeah.
I think we must get over liberation politics.
But you grew up in the ANC.
Correct.
Yeah.
Secondly, you want the new voters to find a new home, because when you join the DA, you create a situation where the DA is an old party. The ANC is an old party. We need new. And we wanted to charter a new pathway for that. So for us, it's not just the convenience of saying, how do we gather together to remove the ANC?
Yeah.
It's also about the long-term plan of what this country must look like.
Yeah. So someone might say, okay, you cannot see your way clear to joining the multi-party charter, but you went and formed your own alliance on the side. What's the difference?
The difference is the multi-party charter, still on the ballot today. All of those parties are on the ballot. The alliance we formed, none of those parties are on the ballot. They've come together to form one entity. Isn't it better? Isn't it better that you have fewer and fewer parties on the ballot?
So when people who support, the constituent members of that alliance vote,
yes, they vote for Bossa.
What will they find on?
They find Bossa.
They find Bossa there.
Bossa on the ballot.
Yeah.
So you might be a member of conceivably AIM, which is an alliance partner we worked with in the Eastern Cape. When they go vote in the Eastern Cape, they'll vote for Bossa. But here's what we've done. The candidates have come from some of the alliance partners. So they will then form part of that list. And accountability is always down at the ground. So that people can say, no, this guy's not working for us. We need to remove this guy. Power must be to the people, but more seriously, we have simplified it for South African voters. We've made it possible for us to actually achieve this whole objective of bringing about change. It's possible. The UDF did exactly the same thing. They came together and said, here's the party that we vote for on the ballot. We have to do the same if we are going to be serious about change.
Okay.
Putting 6 parties is not going to help.
I just want to go before.
I want to add this point that's important. No one here knows that what is the glue inside the MPC? What happens when one of the parties after the election says, no, actually we think maybe in KZN we must join the ANC and form something else? What happens if the DA says we'll work with the ANC here? What was then the point of the MPC?
Yeah.
You see, there's nothing that holds it together. Whereas in our model, your chips are in one bucket. That holds you together. You can't suddenly wake up in the morning and say, well, I'm not in, because the votes are in. They're in one place.
Now, because you're saying that that coalitions are the way of the future.
Absolutely.
That South Africans must get used to.
Absolutely.
Must get used to them.
Yeah.
Now, I go back a few steps and to your old party. Would you work with them?
Yes, on the conditions of the 10-point plan. On the conditions of the 10-point plan, to say, let's put ethical leadership, let's build one South Africa. I'm not convinced, as I sit here today. It's a conversation I'll be open to having with the DA, and it's one of the reasons we left. It's because I wasn't convinced at the time, as we were working to build this one South Africa, even inside the organization, attracting blacks and whites to work together, having to navigate through the contradictions that come with that. Because remember, in this country, if you're trying to bring blacks and whites together, coloreds and Indians in one place, the hopes of one becomes the fears of another.
Yeah.
So you have to be willing to work with us. In fact, it's a subject of a book that I'm bringing out now, because we have to. So when I felt that there were some who were not interested in that project and were garnering support
in the DA,
garnering support of donors, etc., I felt I didn't want a vision where my sole job as leader would be to go fight for the Afrikaans voters who have left. I would rather leave and go build one South Africa. So to the point I'm trying to make now is that any coalition with the DA must be predicated on the resolute commitment that we build one South Africa. It must be built on the fact that we are going to, as I fought, what are we doing in Guguletu? What are we doing in Khayelitsha? What are we doing in Langa? What are we doing in working with South Africa in general? Because you cannot claim, this is again, you cannot claim to be colorblind when it suits you and be colorful when suddenly you want votes from people. You must.
This colorblind issue, would you say that it was a major factor in
of
your
course
eventual
it was,
departure?
because when you say you are colorblind, you can also become racism blind. Because race has a fundamental characteristic in this country. You know, I always simplify it. My home, my wife is a white South African. I'm a black South African. My kids are mixed race. I don't let them come home to say, no, we are colorblind as a family. My kids look at me and say, Papa is black. He grew up in Soweto. Gogo is black. When we go to Soweto, we are going to see black South Africans. They will talk about that. When they see, oh, my mama is white. When we go see Granny, we are seeing a white South African. So if my children can celebrate color and diversity like that, why is a political party being lazy? I think to me it was a seminal issue that stops you from seeing economic injustice. It stops you from seeing legislation that wants to address. That's why when we talk about a Jobs and Justice Fund as a way of bringing redress and restitution, the DA doesn't want to see that. So for me, these were fundamental issues about how do we build inclusion in this country.
Can I ask you this? You know, politicians tend to, when they are on the stage in public, they can become sworn enemies. And behind the scenes, they actually do talk. You may find that there may be a back channel where they're just talking. They're not privately, they're not enemies, or personally, at a personal level, they're not enemies, but publicly they take a particular posture. Do you talk to John Steenhuisen still? Helen Zille? Have you talked to them since you left? Since you left, have you talked to them at all? Like, Helen, hey, it's your birthday today.
No, let me make
birthday.
What I've said in public has remained true in private. For me, when I said the DA, I don't believe is the vehicle to build one South Africa, I meant that. Recently, I traveled with John Steenhuisen overseas. We spoke, no problems. Because
where were you going overseas with
No, we were traveling as part of a delegation to Germany to understand how coalitions work. So that was part of that. Ndade Mike, I say this. I hold an open view that allows me to speak to anybody. Personality can never be the fundamental altar upon which we sacrifice the country. I may not like you. We may have our differences, but the country is bigger than both of us. So I will speak to John Steenhuisen. It was reported here in the Sunday Times. I remember once Helen Zille, I bumped into her on a flight. I reached out to her. She refused to.
Is this a true story?
Completely.
That she actually.
She refused. So in that instance, then I concede that. And if she was sitting here and she wanted to talk, I would be open to talking. Because I don't hold the views that say, no.
But you're able to talk to John Steenhuisen? No problem.
Anybody. I even speak to people inside the ANC.
You talk to Julius?
I speak to Julius. And like to our earlier conversation about coalitions, it's a strength you bring. The strength is be willing. I draw inspiration from people like Nelson Mandela, who against popularity, there were other people asking, why are you going to see Betsy Verwoerd? Why are you talking to these boys? Had it not been for reputational risks of going out to speak to people, you would end up with the challenges that we wouldn't have been able to see the transition we have. I will not, and if the DA were sitting here, my views about their project, all of those things were public, I'll make it to them personally. But I must be willing to say to myself, when you sit in a room, what is in the interest of South Africa?
So as things stand now, you would not say there's a party you would never work with. for example, the position of the DA and the MPC is that they won't work with the ANC, they won't work with the EFF. So do you have political parties that you basically swear never to work with?
The corrupt ones.
Yeah.
Because you can't ask citizens.
Which are those?
The ANC itself is corrupt.
Yeah.
And that's the reason I wouldn't work with the ANC. If the ANC came back and said, we will remove the people who were implicated in Zondo Commission, and we will now show demonstrable actions to create change, I'll talk to them. But so long as you can't create laws, Parliament is a place where lawmakers are, not lawbreakers. So if the ANC sat back and said, look, we are willing to continue the project of corruption, we can speak publicly like we are anti-corruption, but they continue, then there's no point.
EFF?
I've worked with the EFF before. It wasn't a formal coalition in that sense. You will remember. The EFF said, we will help vote in Herman Mashaba, vote in Solim Simanga there. And Julius and I have had extensive conversations. I don't agree with their policies. But I'm not disagreeable to people. The EFF are a party like any other. They represent 10% of society. Let's assume Bossa became the government of 51%. Let's assume that scenario. You still have to engage the EFF because they represent a section of society that you've got to be willing to talk to. This whole khafaring that simply says, we are not talking to those ones, they are evil, they are the enemy, is the sort of seeds that sometimes sow racial divisions in this country. And if we are not careful to synonymize, you say, because I disagree with you. I disagree with the Freedom Front Plus on policy, but I must talk to them.
So when you're talking to them, presumably to form a kind of a coalition partnership, what are you? Because I presume in those conversations there would have to be compromises. There would have to be red lines. There would have to be compromises, give and take. Kind of thing. What would be your absolute non-negotiables with whomever you're talking to?
Our 10-point plan is a non-negotiable.
But would those not be subject to compromise?
Of course, they have to come under fiscal scrutiny
to craft the.
But these are the things.
The alliance.
These are the things we inherently believe that are vital for society. But my red lines are: I will not deal with corrupt people. Because for the point I've made, you can't ask people who have broken the law to write the laws. It's insane. I will not work with racist people because it violates what I believe. If you can't say you want to build one South Africa and others who say this race is wrong, that race is wrong, can't do that. Or they are superior to another race is actually the way of putting it.
Do you think there's a lot of that in the DA, for example?
I think that...
Or in any other political party in South Africa?
In politics and global politics, there is a genuine move of populists who make the other the enemy. And what the danger of that is that it's only a matter of time before you have a hatred for, you say, we are Zulu party. We don't like those ones. We're a colored party. We don't like those ones. We are this party of this race. We don't like those ones. Because let me tell you, it may not be racism against. It will eventually, when you come into government, I've dealt with this issue before, sometimes in coalitions, where someone says to us, these EPWP jobs that are going out, that the state must administer, must only go to coloreds. That's dangerous. It's dangerous when you do that. That's why I always say to people, with respect, 2024 cannot be a 1994. In 1994, you are against apartheid. So yes, remove the apartheid flag. Yes, write a constitution. Yes, parties must represent. You will remember the ballot in 94. I have one sitting in my office. You had Indian parties, you'll remember. You had colored parties, you had white parties. That was what it was. But 2024 must be a new story. It must be parties it must be about new South Africa. That's why I always say to people, South Africa has its own story. That story starts in 94. It has It has a constitution, it has an anthem, it has 2010 World Cup, it has the Springboks, it has companies, it has arts, it has all of that. It also has negatives to that story. It has Zondo Commission, it has all of that. Your job as a leader and as a president in this country is to write the next chapter of the story, not burn the book. And my worry is there are parties who think that when they come in, the whole book must be burnt. It's naive. Your job is to add to the story. And that's the job I want to bring to this country.
One of the key campaign elements for you is putting a job in every home. Now, it sounds to me like any political party can say that in an election. We're going to create so many jobs. The ANC has, made promises like that for a long time. Sometimes it changes to job opportunities. Sometimes it's jobs, that kind of thing. But it's not a very difficult promise to make. How are you going to make this happen?
In similarities, let's not also lose the very inherent point we are making. The inherent point is you've got 40% of households in this country where not a single adult wakes up to go to work. Now, we can say all we like. That home will suffer indignity. That home will have children who have no role models. And we know that from households like that, that's where the dropout rates increase, because those young people cannot find places where they don't stay in school for long. We also know that in those homes, there's profound violence because of the stress of that. Those homes are dependent on remittances and welfare. So what we've got to do is say to ourselves, we've worked out that it's about 2 million jobs over the next 5-year period that we put there. And I look at it as a garden, Dr. Mike. In a garden, you have to build the appropriate conditions for those gardens and then plant certain things there that you want in that garden. So on the conditions issue, our economy is not going to grow when the lights go off. And I know load shedding is on leave because of the elections. It will return.
You believe it's on leave because of the elections?
It just took some time off to think about itself, It will come back though. Because the reality of it is that part of the electricity availability factor, as that discussion, part of it is the reduction of demand as citizens are making alternative plans. So we have to keep the lights on, and I've proposed that we introduce SMRs and ensure that our fleet can be augmented.
What are SMRs?
Small modular reactors.
Okay.
So those are the kind of nuclear technology that's safe, that ensures that you augment your energy base so that you've got a good base load. It's about growth. The second issue is that we've got to fix logistics. So that's about goods. That's about splitting Transnet into its component parts so that goods can move in and out in the ports, but also people can move from places of work. Let's be fair. When I grew up in Dobsonville, we had a train from Naledi Station to Joburg. Today, that train doesn't run. So passenger rail has become a challenge in terms of, and in fact, my master's program was focused on nothing else but transport logistics. The third dilemma or dynamic is about skilling our young people. You are not going to build an economy unless your young people are able to pass by more than 30%. They have to pass by 50%, fix the schooling. And the fourth is making sure our communities are safe. Because you can't run a business in an unsafe community. And then lastly, build infrastructure aggressively, because it cannot be that in our townships we don't have broadband infrastructure, that the proliferation of that, roads, all of the bulk sewage. Johannesburg today is running out of water. I tell you this for gratis. The hotels in Sandton will shut down. Because you can't invite tourists to a place without water, for example. So along with those for me are conditions. But then when it comes to issues of what we want to plant in there, so there are a couple of initiatives. We've put together a 220 billion rands allocation to make sure SMMEs can grow. We've targeted townships as special economic zones so that you have a tax burden that's removed there so that people can build infrastructure in townships. Imagine being able to put up a call center in a township and not have to pay tax. You're employing people. It's not a job in every home. It's a job closer to home. We want to make sure that, furthermore, we introduce a national civilian service, which means that you give young people a year's program where they can work for a year and the state pays them for the full year, but they do 6 months internship and 6 months work readiness program. You do that mandatory for all young people across the country so that they get the work experience. We've become
how different will that be from the current government public works?
The extended public works program. The extended public works program is focused on particular programs. So those are about young people sweeping streets, doing that kind of work.
That's not what you're talking about.
Actually, I want to focus extensively on getting young people to intern in law firms and hospitals so that public service becomes broader than just simply let's get people to go. Just because what work experience is that? It doesn't always help. I want to do that. And more crucially, it's about ensuring that along with that, we target particular sectors. One of the sectors that I think we've lost as a country is manufacturing. So when you look at the manufacturing of kettles, microwaves, South Africa only makes 4% of that, yet the whole country uses a kettle or a microwave, etc. So increase manufacturing in that space. We've got to be clear about our ability to attract more tourists. So that's about adjudication of visas, making it quicker and easier. And African tourism is important. And then looking at mining and all other sectors so that we can improve the ability to create more work. Lastly, I do think that the one thing we haven't done well enough in South Africa is to look at intra-Africa trade. That's about creating ASEAN, because half of the reason South Africa isn't growing is because we can't fund for growth. So we create a jobs and justice fund. We partner with Africa so that you can have a broadening economy. We've only got 60 million people. Why would we lose track of the 1.4 billion by 2040? So let's be clear about how do we invest in that, because that will give us new opportunities. For example,
in practice, what would that look like?
In practice, it has dynamics like creating potentially a shared currency even in Africa. We look at how do we adjudicate e-visas in the continent so that it's quicker for businesses and goods to do that. We build infrastructure in Africa so that goods can travel quicker. It's easier for me to move container items to China than it is to Senegal. That doesn't make sense, right? We need to make it easier in that way. We also practically think about COVID. Imagine if Africa had its own centralized pharmacology center so that we could manufacture vaccines here locally and make them there. And more crucially, it means that, I always ask people, why are Nigerians drinking French wine instead of drinking South African wine? And why are we as South Africans not being able to take certain goods from Nigeria, from Kenya? Kenya has just developed technology around M-Pesa, which is an unbelievable piece of banking technology. And how do we help that here in Africa? So in many ways, I am a Pan-Africanist. Who's interested in economic intra-trade.
But you would yes, we would have that. Intertrade, I think it makes a lot of sense. Actually, some people say it's actually critical. It's absolutely essential.
Correct.
But of course, you would have to deal with issues of immigration,
without doubt.
Issues of how do you manage? Because there's a lot. I'm sure you more than anyone else, you are aware of the pressure and the tension around immigration, particularly of African immigrants coming into South Africa. How would you manage that?
Yeah. My starting point is simply this. So no country can operate without securing its own borders, right? Like it can't. And secondly, we need to broaden our home affairs facilities so that people can be able to be legalized. So in other words, be able to get an electronic visa upon application, etc. So we've got to be able to do that. But I always use the metaphor of a house where water is flooding into the house. If there's water coming into your house, the first thing that you do is not to pick up a mop, is to go find out where the water is coming from. And then you close that tap.
Yeah.
Zimbabwe, as things stand, we've allowed Mnangagwa and ZANU-PF to run that country to the ground. In fact, if it wasn't for the ANC's policy on the government of national unity when Mugabe had lost elections, we wouldn't have this influx of Zimbabweans coming into the country. We made it possible by creating those conditions.
Sorry, Mr. to interrupt you there. But what could the ANC have done, or the South African government have done?
We should have allowed,
because Zimbabwe is a sovereign country.
No, we should have allowed for elections to come to deliver the outcomes it had. Mugabe had lost. Allow for Morgan Tsvangirai, who I was working with at the time, to take leadership of the country. That's how democracy works.
But how? Because they're a sovereign country.
No. We were the ones who went there and intervened. And because people were arguing about the role of the army at the time, South Africa needs to be able to take a much stronger leadership role. I take the point about sovereignty of the country, but up to which point do we remain sovereignty of a country when it's having profound consequences on your immigration laws, etc.?
Right.
You can't sit back. You have to intervene. We have to use our strength. We have to use, when Malawi Malawi rigs elections, like the TIPEX elections. It was us where to go fight that case.
So you are still like unpacking the
immigration.
Just to your analogy of water coming out of a
deal with those.
So you are saying deal with what's going on in Zim,
Deal with what's going. When Malawi was having its problems, attend to that. Attend to issues where your borders. Then I also think that, for example, Lesotho, being that it's landlocked within South Africa, practically Basotho must have their passports being issued by Pretoria, and we don't have to deal with this border management amongst Basotho. That's a fact. And then to come back domestically, if you create a space upon which, because this issue is not just, the populist will come here and tell you on your podcast, we will lock them up in buses and ship them off the country. That's absolute nonsense. There are too many people who have been in the country, married to South Africans. There are South African children here. So we've got to take a 2-year...
you can't unscramble.
We've got a 2-year period upon which everyone must be legalized and regularized. And you broaden your home affairs opportunities. You deal with Refugee Act to make sure that we've only got 7 refugee centers. So we've got to ensure that we actually increase those so that anyone who's registered must be there. But here's my view. If you are in South Africa, and I'm unapologetic about this, you will learn the South African law. To gain any form of citizen in this place, you will know the South African law, you will speak South African languages, and you are not going to set up your own community here in South Africa and say, for example, when I have just been in the city center, you've got small pockets that are called Little Lagos or whatever. We can't have that. When you come to South Africa, you will apply South African laws, participate in South African, because you are in the South African schooling system, all of those things. Because otherwise, if you don't do that, you end up with countries or particularly enclaves where people have got laws that are foreign to your citizens. That's what creates part of the issues.
There's one view that says that, if you say go to Botswana and you're saying you're a refugee or an asylum seeker, you will be accepted, you will be documented, but you will be sent to a refugee camp. You're not allowed to wander about and like unaccounted for. What's your view of that? Do you think that people who come to South Africa perhaps should not be allowed to just freely mix and do as they like? Should we put them in camps for processing?
We've tried that, and in all fairness, the camps did not work. You'll remember there were scenes of all of these camps popping up everywhere. It's an international discussion, right? How we manage it. That's why if you don't deal with the source, you are going to have an influx of refugees and asylum seekers in a way you can't manage.
So you wouldn't support the isolation?
I'm quick to the pathway of making sure that we regularize and legalize people quickly. Because let me tell you, there is a theory in the world right now of what is called the secular flow of immigration. It says, actually, I don't think Zimbabweans want to stay in South Africa. I think what encourages illegality is when people can't find legality, they start to stay in the country for fear that if they go home, they'll never be able to come back, etc. Legalize it quickly, so that you know where financial flows are, all of those things, and so that if a citizen wants to go back home, they can go back home quick enough. I think we've got a problem because one of the things that we talk about as refugee camps is but one component. But we are so discriminating of fellow Africans that we forget that if you go to property ownership on the Atlantic seaboard in Cape Town, those are owned in some ways by Russians, by various people. No one is raising a flag there. So clearly this issue has got Africans up against other Africans. We've got to be clear. All law must apply to all citizens equally, whether you are from the US or from Uganda. It must apply, and we must secure our border so that no one can come in illegally. And if you are an asylum seeker, we must be able to figure out how do we give you the proper documentation to make it possible to restore the situation at home so that you can go back home. That's the issue. But we've got to do it legally and properly, because otherwise you create context upon which, you make immigration an evil. Immigration is not an evil. There are South Africans living in Perth. Some of them are living in London. Some of them are living in Botswana. Many of them are moving to Namibia. Why should those countries now stand up and say South Africans must go? Can't be like that.
Yeah, before we run out of time, one of the big issues, and it links to your earlier point about creating the conditions for economic growth, crime. how would you deal with the crime problem in South Africa, which seems to be getting worse, actually?
Of course.
Not better.
It's getting worse because, South Africa, we put things on sunset clauses and we never actually do the work because we don't have a government. We've got an autopilot presidency that's not doing its job. The reality of it is that you've got to devolve policing, right? That was one of the recommendations post-94 in the Constitution. But we didn't do that because we feared at the time of heightened violence that each province would have its own military state. But actually, the only way you fight crime is actually have a combination of both what is national police and regional police. And having regional police helps you bring intelligence lower down to the ground because South Africa is not giving birth to new criminals every day. Criminals are committing new crimes every day. So what happens is that the community knows. South Africans know where the criminals are. So to me, bring intelligence lower down to the ground. That's the first thing. You can identify easy so that you can collect better evidence in the criminal justice system. The second issue is that merge localized policing, metro police, and private security. There are more private security guards in this country than there are policemen, which is the first time.
Yeah.
Merge those things so that you increase the force.
But how do you merge them? Because the one is private sector, the other is public.
So what you do is...
And the other one is paid for directly by the users.
You Uberize its response. So in other words, you and I are sitting at home and we hear criminals outside. When you dial 911 or you dial 10111, you dial any response unit, the vehicle closest to that must respond first, whether it's private or public.
Yeah.
Because what you then do is you make sure that the reduction of crime is the knowledge of being caught. It's not sometimes the actual punitive action. It's the fear of being caught. As we stand right now, criminals are not scared of being caught.
But Mmusi, it won't resolve the fundamental problem. In other words, where you are merging private security and the SAPS, that model might work in the suburbs, for example, because there are lots of private, if you go to Soweto or Guamashu, you only really have police.
But now what you suddenly are doing...
So your nearest car is likely to be a police van sitting somewhere that's not able to get out anyway, because
meaning that you can actually you break away the old apartheid model of policing, which said that let's build police stations in a space that protects whites and stops. You've got to break that down. Now let me tell you, part of the science in this issue is simply this: the ratio of police to citizen, right, is international benchmarking says it's 1 to 350, somewhere there. South Africa, in Dobsonville, in my community, as it's expanded, Snake Park, Dorongo, those numbers have increased so the ratio of policing to citizens, when I last checked, was 1 to 1,300. Now, that policeman is not going to be able to fight crime. So when you aggregate with the sort of force, you then stimulate for private security to come into play. You help possibility where Metro Police, why should the Metro Police be spending time checking my license disc when a murder is taking place? Let them be focused on that.
The private security people, devil's advocate, might say, why must they service the state when actually they are supposed to be servicing their clients? In other words, what will be in it for them?
It's a market. It's a recognition of market failure. The reality of it is that you privatize security. You privatize anything because of market failure. You might say, why should a private school exist? Why should anything? The reality of it is just to compensate, because crime is bad for all of us. Let's be fair. But it's not the only intervention. One of the crucial things is the rotation of policing, because part of the dilemma is that you end up in a space where police become familiar with drug pins in certain instances, and then they become corrupted. So you need to be able to move people around for very obvious reasons. And when intelligence is to the ground, you can deal with systemic crime. Let me give you the hope. We did actually start to see a decrease in crime. You'll remember in 2008, 2009, all the way to 2010, crime was decreasing. Why? What were the fundamentals? Because you must look at a time when things worked. What worked? We funded the police. We capacitated them in numbers. We were preparing for the World Cup. We also ensured the fact that we prioritize, so that a detective isn't sitting at their desk dealing with a motor vehicle accident, murder, rape, everything. Prioritize murder. Say, that's all we focus on, everybody. And so you capacitate on that score. You train your detectives better. You fund them. At this point, Begicele doesn't have a crime plan. He thinks that the louder he shouts, he'll fight crime. That's not how you work it. Bring intelligence lower down to the ground. Increase visibility. Remember also, you are discussing the issue of how do we deal with it at intervention level.
Yeah.
I'm proposing to you that by the increasing of visibility, prevention in this instance becomes better than cure. And so we begin to attend to the question of the 75 murders a day. We prioritize murder and we focus. You become aggressive. Fixing along with the criminal justice system, because at this point in time, our courts are cumbersome and the evidence presented to the courts becomes poor. You and I always talk, we celebrate, hey, we have the courts in this country. But we forget the fact that we are describing the Constitutional Court, the Supreme Court of Appeal.
Or the police have arrested
the High Court.
A whole lot of people, in connection with a particular crime, and then nothing comes of it.
But we don't talk about magistrates' courts.
Yeah.
When you go to magistrates' courts where petty crime is being reported, the systems there sometimes don't work. They don't work. You speak to enough women here who go and report cases of battery and assault. The truth of the matter is that the evidence is poor.
Yeah.
The system is too long. And then you end up in a space where people simply don't find justice.
Yeah. Now the president has signed the NHI bill. What's your view? Obviously, it's very divisive. There are people who will say, well, it's important, that we move in that direction so that more and more people get the benefit, of proper health care. But other people are saying there are a million questions that need to be answered about it.
The problem with it is that it's a very populist thing. They're doing it now before an election, really without some of the capability of being able to achieve that. Secondly, it's 500 billion rands investment where we have a state that's heavily indebted, doesn't have the money for it. And thirdly, I think that it's a poor way of thinking about health economics. So my view is that we do need a form upon which we broaden access to healthcare. So my suggestions are simple. Let the state be the primary underwriter of healthcare. So what you then do is you say to yourself at primary healthcare level, if someone is living in Limpopo in a rural community and they go to a hospital and there's long lines, but there's a surgery of a doctor close down the road, let them go to that doctor and be able to, and the state will underwrite and pay for it. But if you, as a private medical aid holder, wants to get the best hepatologists, they happen to be at Groote, which is a public hospital, you must go there, but medical aid must pay for that, so that you create a dual system. You create a model upon which the state is the underwriter. You capacitate primary health care so that it's accessible to all in both public and private sector, so that if you need immediate treatment and you need a triage or you need quick intervention, you can arrive even at a private hospital and the state will underwrite that. You then fix state assets so that you appoint the best leadership there, because it will be able to gain income not only from the state but also from the private citizens who have got medical aid, because you've got certain expertise. There are certain expertise that sit at Bara. If I was looking for a particular procedure, I might be able to go to a public hospital before I'd go to a private one, because all the specialists who come from go there and they see caseload. If I had a stab wound, to be honest with you, I don't want to go to a private hospital. I want to go to a public one, because there I know that the doctors have seen enough casework. So broaden it and be inclusive. NHI is not going to work because the ANC is incapable of administering such a complicated system, and it becomes progressively expensive. You look at what happens in the UK, you look at various countries like that, it becomes a fiscal drain. So unless you are figuring out the best ways to increase your fiscus by the number of people who work, it's going to be a disaster for this country.
Just quickly.
So I will oppose it legally.
You will?
I will oppose the issue legally because I think, one, it's a populist thing, and I think, two, even the trial sites have not delivered the results that the government knows that they should be getting.
What would make you support it?
It's not about making me support that. It's about really understanding that as the model as I've proposed it for how the state must work, that would be a different proposal. So we've got a different bill that we would put before Parliament to say, this is how our healthcare can work in this country.
Yeah. Just quickly, before you leave us, there has been the idea of a national dialogue after the election, presumably. What's your view?
Yeah, it's called Parliament.
Would it? No, but clearly the assumption is that Parliament has not worked in terms of dealing with the critical issues that the country is crying out for a solution for.
I think it will be necessary. I think that it isn't the only precondition you want to build.
Yeah.
Because, sure, it's fine to have a dialogue and we may walk out of a dialogue with a different consensus. But the greater difficulty is that what you don't have is a capability of government to be able to effect any plan that you would put on the table. So whilst we have a national dialogue, let's also fix the capability of the state so that whatever is a resolution that comes from there, you've got capability of implementation. So I don't have a problem with a national dialogue. I think we must have one. I think that what it needs to happen is that it must allow for parties who previously have not spoken to each other to be able to find each other on certain issues, and so that we create an emboldened vision for where South Africa goes. The difficulty is I don't want a national dialogue to be a replacement for democratic practices, because what people generally do is they do what happened in Zimbabwe. Is they say, well, the ANC is lost. Let's create a national unity thing, a government of national unity, include them. Hang on. We can't keep repeating the same mistakes as we've seen in Africa. If you lose an election, go sit on the bench, go renew yourself. The ANC wants to renew itself. Give them time to do so. Don't rob them of their opportunity.
Now, you were saying, just now that the parliament is the place where the conversations should be happening.
Correct.
But somebody looking at what happens in our parliament, even what passes for debates and stuff, you can see that there is no engagement, that is very positional. Everything is approached from a positional point of view. Don't you think that's what brings parliament into a logjam? Because people are looking and they're saying, oh, okay, if you're opposition, you must oppose for the sake of opposing. If you're ANC in this case, you support everything government does. You defend the ministers, even if they are in the wrong.
It's why this moment is vital, right? It's vital because let's not judge the rules of parliament on the basis of one-party dominance. Actually, I think it was Freni Janwala was one of the first speakers. He worked in a government of national unity, and actually parliament worked. Actually, we were able to table bills. We were able to advance the democratic project, right? So let's not look at history just one-sided. I think the reason we need a grand coalition of the opposition is because you do two things. The first thing is you will elect a speaker that's independent. One of the biggest failures is that all the speakers we've had under Zuma and even recently have all been compromised. I mean, with the most recent one now facing criminal charges. It's what happens when you fail to elect a speaker who can be able to harmonize the interests of the country. In the Constitution, the role of the speaker is as significant as that of the president. And I think we've downplayed that to anyone who wants to go sit in that chair. That's the first. The second is you are then able to say, okay, given the executive agenda and the combination, how do we correct the imbalance of making sure parliament is the supreme anchor, apex of accountability, and the executive is accountable to that, not the other way around. And in a multi-party, or if you like, a grand coalition of the opposition, no president will be able to come to parliament and enjoy the protection of the majority. They will always arrive there knowing, I'm here for South Africa. All questions. No one can defend you. You either know your story or you don't. And if you have a speaker who then says to you, because I used to be frustrated in parliament, sometimes you'd ask a question, hey, explain to us about state capture. If the president wanted to read from Bona magazine and say, this is my answer, then the speaker says, that's the answer.
That's it.
Because, whereas now you would have to account and you have to do that. And what's exciting about the ANC loses majority is they stop disrespecting people. It's majoritarianism in that way that has led us to a chaotic parliament. That's why people protest in parliament rather than, in fact, construct. When we're the first day in parliament, when parliament convenes, you take an oath to the constitution, not to the party. And then after that day, you are an equal member to any other member in that legislature. The difficulty is that the ANC has made it its own ground. In fact, they use it in the famous words, we are just sending voting cattle there. We'll disband the Scorpions. Go vote there. Swimming pool, go vote there. Now they can never do that.
On the assumption that you will, after the 29th, be going back to Parliament, we'll be watching you keenly to see how this time round, how you try to impact things, kind of thing.
I have a vision for this country, and we have to fight for it with everything inside of us. And therefore, the nice thing about leaving Parliament in 2019 and taking time out is that it gave me time to think. I've been writing a book. I'm completing a PhD. I've been in business now. I'm coming back reinvigorated. We have a fight now.
Okay. Mmusi Maimane, thank you very much for joining us on the Sunday Times Politics Weekly. We thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
My great privilege.
You dropping by.
Thank you so much.
And all the best in your campaign to go back to Cape Town.
I'm going back to bring change. Not me alone. Everyone is going.
Okay, that's why we'll wrap it up this time round on the Sunday Times Politics Weekly. I'm Mike Siluma. Until next time, do stay safe, stay blessed, and let's do good for our country.